Hello and welcome to this Wednesday edition of Proud Malcontent, Wednesday the 24th of September already. God, just looking, that makeup girl's on her final warning. What's been happening? Not very much, but there is a new poll out, so we might as well entertain ourselves with that, eh? And it's quite an in-depth poll. It was for the National, and the name of the firm has gone right out of my head. But yeah, we'll take a look at that, and then we have another item which is on John Swinney's potential problems at the S&P conference next month. And then we've got a new final item, what I'm hoping will be a regular feature, and that's right at the finish of the show. So hang about for that, even if nothing else. Right. So let's get to it with this poll. There we are. S&P on for major lead in Westminster and Holyrood votes. Poll finds. No surprise there. This one that we're looking at is the Westminster voting intention. I want to skip by that just now and look at the Holyrood constituency and regional voting intention by party. And here we see the SNP on 33% in the constituency vote and 25% on the regional vote. And coming in second behind the SNP, Reform. Yep, Reform. And they're on 19%. They've overtaken British Labour in Scotland. The British Tories in Scotland are well behind. They're on the way out, and Labour also perhaps. But it's what I find very hard to get my head around is the fact that 19% of people are voting for Reform on the constituency vote and 16 on the regional list vote. I just find it really difficult to get my head around that. Just so as they kind of claim that I'm ignoring them, there's Alpa there, and they are on 5% on the list vote. Now, that's interesting because if you'll recall, our exploration of the AMS voting system with Stephen Duncan, with the intervention of Reform basically means that there's more competition for seats, and therefore the price of a seat goes up. That's the best analogy for it. In previous elections, there's been an effective threshold, not an official threshold, but there has been an effective threshold of around 6%, 6.5%, thereabouts. So at 5%, Alpa aren't even making that old threshold, because now that Reform has entered the market, that threshold is going up 2 points, is going up by about a third to something over 8%, and it could get more. So that's not looking promising for Alpa. And then there's others, which will probably include the likes of Liberate Scotland. Liberate Scotland. See, it was that deliberate, calling them Liberate Scotland so that I could get them mixed up. Everybody will get them mixed up with Liberation Scotland. That's yeah, that annoys me. That annoys me. But they're on the constituency. They're 2%, the same as ALPA. That's not all Liberate Scotland, by the way. This is all others. But I should imagine Liberate Scotland are in amongst that. So they've got some wee share of that 2%. And on the list, 3%. So they're nothing and nowhere as far as this poll is concerned. And remember, we have to treat these polls as facts because they're the best information that we have at the moment. And if we're planning for the election, if we're planning a campaign or whatever, we need the best information we can get, and that is these polls. So we have to treat them as facts. We have to assume that they're right until we know different. That is, until the next poll. And then the main thing that we can tell from them is trends. So the trend for reform is good. The trend for the Tories and Labour is bad. The trend for the SNP really hasn't changed much over recent times. It's pretty much stayed static. It's the switching around in the other areas that's letting the SNP get the highest number. But what we must keep in mind, assuming that this poll is correct, then we have to keep in mind the fact, and it is as close to a fact as we can get at this time. The fact of the matter is that the SNP is once again going to dominate Holyrood. It's going to be by far the biggest party, and it will therefore almost certainly be the party of government, either on its own or in some sort of coalition, or at least propped up by the Greens. Or some other party, maybe? No, unlikely. It's only likely to be the Greens that prop them up. But this we have to treat as a fact. And if we are thinking about what we should do between now and the actual vote, the actual election, if we are thinking what we should do to change things, we have to know that we're starting from the point that we are, that this bar graph shows. That is where we are right now. And where we are is with the SNP dominating. Now, I get stick for, I get people saying, no, when I tell you things like this, when I say things like this, I get stick. People saying that I'm supporting the SNP, or I'm urging people to vote SNP, or promoting the SNP. I'm not. I have no interest in doing any of these things. I'm not here to tell anybody how to vote. If I've got a job at all here, it's to try and explain, or at least explore, the consequences, the implications of voting in a particular way. So that is all I'm saying. And I take account too of the electorate. The electorate, remember, is a dumb beast. And there's this thing that I call voter inertia. There's a place where all the activists are, all the people who actually think about elections and politics in general on more than a 4-yearly or 5-yearly basis, when there's actually the polls are opening. There are people who think at least a bit about politics every day, and that there's a place where we are. And then there's a place where the massive majority of voters are. The massive majority of voters are not anoraks. And trust me, if you are watching this, you're an anorak. I'm an anorak. I have no problem with being that. The exceptions are the people who are showing in the ALPA and other column. They are people who are thinking about politics, and they are wanting something other than the SNP. I would guarantee, although there are no numbers on it, I would guarantee that most of them are actually pro-independence. They're voting for other pro-independence parties, because all the pro-union parties have been soaked up by reform. The point here is that as the SNP are going to be the government again, so we have to think in those terms. And let's just take a look now at the Holyrood seat projection. The poll was conducted, by the way, by Find Out Now for the National, and it was run between September 15th and 21st. So this is bang up to date information. It's about as up to date as you'll get. And now we have the Holyrood seat projections, courtesy of John Curtis. Courtesy, yeah. There's a joke in there somewhere. And again, this emphasizes even more the dominance of the SNP with 57 seats. Still not a majority. Remember, 65 seats needed for a majority. But if they can be sure of being propped up by the Greens, that's never a certainty. That's another 18 seats, giving them about 75. So, you know, they're well propped up there. There is going to be an SNP minority government. That's what this poll is telling us. There will be an SNP minority government, and propped up by the Greens, and the other parties, even Reform, they will be ineffectual. They will be ineffectual unless they combine. There's Labour on 16 seats, the Conservatives on 13, that's 29, and the Reform on 17 seats, so that's 46. That's 46, still nowhere near. Maybe with the Lib Dems, they're up to 54. We can imagine, and it is only imagining, that if the SNP vote was to drop any at all, then that would, and those votes were going to any of these other parties, then it would be possible for those parties in combination to form a government. You know, a grand unionist alliance, a British alliance. It's not looking at all likely at the moment, but it is always a possibility, and it's something that we should keep in mind, because it is one of the alternatives, perhaps the only alternative to the SNP. If there was an alliance like that, that would definitely be competing with the SNP. Let's go back to the Westminster voting intention. And again, the SNP dominating here, but not quite so much. They're on 30% of the vote. And again, Reform coming in second, 23%. That I find shocking, that there are 23% of people in Scotland willing to vote Reform, another 10% voting Tory. So that's a third of Scots voting for right-wing or ultra-right-wing parties. That's painting a very different picture of Scotland from the one that we like to project for ourselves. That's a big right-wing move there. And remember, if we add Labour onto that, because nobody can possibly suppose that British Labour is a left-wing party anymore, not since Starmer took office. So in terms of Westminster seats, that's the SNP back up to 42, which will be good news for them. Doesn't mean a lot for the rest of us. Doesn't mean a lot for Scotland's cause. And coming second is Labour, then the Lib Dems, and then the Conservatives trailing, with but still getting 3 seats. I expect they're in the borders, well, that is problematic for the SNP. The SNP has never managed to make any inroads there. And that's where they'd be looking for more seats. However, if it's a majority of seats at Westminster that are required in order to take effective action, then they've got that. They've got 42 seats, a huge majority. What will they do with it? Well, probably not very much. They never did before. They've had bigger majorities than that, and they've never done anything. Note, however, that what is missing from that seat projection: no reform. Reform winning no seats in a Westminster election. Remember, we're talking about now. Reform winning no seats, but other polls are telling us, UK-wide polls are telling us, that Reform is going to pretty much sweep the boards the next UK general election, which has to be no later than, I think it's August 2029. But of course, Starmer could call an election earlier than that. Why he would want to, I have no idea. Perhaps to get the hell out of there before it gets any worse. But no seats in Scotland, and yet we're going to have a Reform UK British government, and that's worse. That is so much worse than either British Labour or the British Tories. This is Nigel Farage. He has no limits. There are no constraints on him. There's absolutely no telling what he's likely to do. He's likely to do anything. If anybody was going to, this is a potential threat that I've mentioned numerous times in the past. If anybody was going to change the UK constitution to the extent that there is a UK constitution, but if anybody was going to change it so as to lock Scotland into a reformed and modernised union, then Farage is the one that's likely to do it. He's that type of guy. He just, if you look at what he's saying about immigration and you extend that mindset to other areas of policy, he is going to be an absolute nightmare. And all the worse for Scotland, because they've got no MPs. And remember, although there's 23% of the vote there, 23% of the vote in Westminster, it's only seats that count. If you don't get seats, then you don't count. So this is another instance of a government being imposed on Scotland that we have not voted for. A Reform UK government and no Reform MPs from Scotland. That's the way it's looking on the Westminster front. Now, some will say, oh, that's a great thing. That's ammunition for the independence campaign. And perhaps it is. People should be angry about this. They should be angry that we have imposed on us governments that we didn't vote for. But I mean, that hasn't made a difference in the past. We never get the government that we vote for. We always get the government that England votes for. Sometimes it just happens to be that we have voted for the same government, but we don't get it because we voted for it. We get it because England has voted for it. That's the reason we get it. We never get the UK government that we vote for. So I've got some summary notes on the polls. I'll just zip through them before we move on to the next item. If you don't mind me reading here, I had to write this stuff down. Apologies for that stripe across the screen. It's the sun. This is a south-facing window, and it's not the best arrangement. I'm going to have to think of something else. That's just the sun shining through a crack in the blind. It's a bit annoying, but hey, not nearly annoying as me, right? And the poll found this is the general election predictions. They've got two headings here. This is AI generated, by the way, summary. And it says general election predictions and Holyrood election predictions. Well, the Holyrood election is officially, legally, according to the Scotland Act, also a general election. It's a Scottish general election. So you have to specify. So it's either a British general election or a Scottish general election. So on the British general election, SNP, 30% of the vote, Scottish Labour, they still believe it's Scottish Labour and that Scottish Labour is a party. Yeah, well, what can you do? What can you do? Reform in second place on 23%, Labour 15%. Based on uniform swing, seat projections were SNP 42, Labour 6, Tories 6, and Lib Dems 3. John Curtis notes that Reform UK, despite its strong polling, might not win any seats, but their numbers are close enough in some constituencies that this could change. That's worthwhile noting. I'm kind of glad I read that now. The Holyrood election, or the Scottish general election. Predictions. These are not predictions. These are indications. In the constituency vote for Holyrood, the SNP polled 33%, followed by Reform UK 19%, and British Labour in Scotland at 14%. Take note, it's British Labour in Scotland. It's also Conservative and Unionist Party in Scotland. So that's British Labour in Scotland, that's Bliss, and the British Conservatives and Unionist Party in Scotland, that's B Cups. Easy to remember. SNP 33%, Reform 19%, Scottish Labour 14%. On the list vote, SNP 25%, Reform 16%, and Scottish Labour 15%. John Curtis cautions that the phrasing of the list vote question may have skewed the results by encouraging SNP supporters to name a second choice party, like the Greens or maybe ALPA, rather than their actual list vote preference. Based on the poll results, Curtis projects the following seat counts for Holyrood: SNP 57, Greens 18, Reform UK 17, Labour 16, Conservatives 13, and Lib Dems 8. This would give the nominally pro-independence parties a 75-seat majority. The poll also found that 52% of Scots would back independence in a second referendum. We've never had a proper constitutional referendum, but people will insist on calling it the second referendum. The next referendum that we had damn well better be a proper constitutional referendum, and it will be the first one. 48 who would not back independence. So that's really no change. When you allow for the normal 3% margin of error, it's effectively still hovering around that 50% mark. And what it calls, what they're calling a pro-independence party's majority of 75 seats, is not by any realistic definition of a pro-independence party. A pro-independence party is a party that has an actual proposal for restoring Scotland's independence. And neither the SNP nor the Greens have that. So although they're doing a good job at the moment, SNP in particular doing a good job of keeping the British parties out, as far as Scotland's cause is concerned, they're doing nothing. They're doing nothing useful because they have no plan. They have no proposal. Their only proposal, their only idea is to request another Section 30 order. And that's the whole thing. John Swinney's strategy, I hate to call it that, but his strategy is to try and replicate the 2011 election in which the SNP kind of swept the board and got an actual majority, which is supposed to be impossible. And John Swinney's strategy is to try and replicate that. The man's an oaf. I mean, there's no other word for it. He's an oaf. If he thinks 2011 can be replicated in a purposeful way, then he's just a buffoon. And remember, it is based on the SNP getting a majority of the seats, but the SNP is only going to get on that projection. What was it? In the 57 seats, 57, and a majority is 65 or 66, 65, 66. 66 gives a bit of leeway. So they're nowhere near that majority. So that's Swinney's strategy. I stutter when I'm calling it a strategy. It's not a strategy, it's a piece of idiocy. But his strategy for independence, supposedly, is a total non-starter. It's just not going anywhere. I don't think anybody can realistically imagine that the SNP are somehow going to gain enough votes to win another seat, another 8 seats. It's perfectly possible that Reform might win some more, with the way their polling has been going. That they're on and up at the moment. And there's the winners factor. I wrote about that in my blog today. There's the winners factor. People like winners. Winners are attractive. So people tend more to vote for winners. Right now, Reform looking like winners. When you look like a winner, you get on a roll. At some point, that role stops. It comes up against a wall of the other parties, people who are quite firm in their commitment to other parties. But it can be on a roll for quite some time. So it's not safe to assume that Reform won't win more seats. It's pretty safe to assume that the SNP won't. It's pretty safe to assume that the SNP is not going to get 65 seats or 66 or 67. That's not going to happen. And it was never going to happen, or it was never safe to assume that it was going to happen. So when somebody bases their strategy for independence, for restoring independence, on what they call their strategy for restoring independence, it's not actually. It's a strategy for making a Section 30 request. It's not even a strategy for getting a Section 30 order. It's just a strategy for asking for it, which you could do anyway. But it was never safe to assume. So it was never safe to assume that the SNP were going to get 65, 66 seats. So why the hell do you base your election strategy on that? Why would you base your election strategy on something that is unlikely to happen, even very unlikely to happen? Why would you do that? I don't get it at all. But if that poll is correct, and remember, we must assume that it is at this point in time, we must assume that it is because it's the best information we have. If that poll is right, John Swinney is going to be back in office again. The SNP are going to be back in government, and he'll have a perfect excuse for doing nothing. He didn't get a majority of seats. His action point was based on getting a majority of seats. He hasn't got that, so he doesn't do anything. In actual fact, he could still request a Section 30 order. He could do that anytime. It doesn't matter when he asks for it. He's not going to get it. I mean, a smart Prime Minister might take a chance and preempt the election and preempt Swinney's strategy on this by actually offering a Section 30 order, maybe 8, 9, 10 weeks before the election. And that'll leave John Swinney with nothing on the constitutional issue. They'll have nothing to campaign with. It's unlikely to happen, but a smart Prime Minister, I think we've covered this before, a smart Prime Minister would know that a Section 30 referendum is perfectly safe because it can't possibly lead to the end of the Union, because it always leaves Westminster with the last word, not the Scottish people. It leaves Westminster with the last word. So they just have to say no. That's it. They've had some practice at that. But that's John Swinney's strategy. So, as you can imagine, that's going to present him with some difficulties when it comes to the conference, because I'm looking for my notes on this, and I don't appear to have them. It doesn't matter because I know what I'm doing here. There was an article in the National today, and the headline's interesting. John Swinney, independence plan faces wrecking attempt by SNP members. Well, that's rather a harsh way of putting it. I mean, the members of the party are submitting amendments, and some of these amendments are going to be debated. Whether they've any chance of succeeding or not is questionable. The leadership and the payroll vote is pretty tough. They're solid. John Swinney is well protected. The leadership is well protected, even better protected than before, because it's going to be that there's a challenge for the leadership will be almost impossible. But there are these amendments that are seeking to fiddle with his plan in some way. There's amendments that are seeking to bring in the idea that it will be a majority of the list vote, make the list vote a de facto referendum. Well, that won't work, but there are people suggesting that, which is pretty much the same as ALPA. And this is backed by 43 local branches. This is actually a change. It's 43 branches that first proposed a different resolution. That resolution got knocked back, and so now they're submitting this amendment to the leadership resolution rather than an alternative resolution. But I've read this 9-point plan of this this amendment is suggesting. Excuse me, I forgot to bring water, so I'm struggling a little here. But I've read this 9-point plan, and really, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. It talks about setting up new bodies, and it's just doing things in what seems like a very complicated way, replicating institutions that are already there, and at the end of the day, not really any better chance of succeeding. I really think it's a non-starter, and I think is going to get voted down anyway, partly because the leadership is protected, but also because a lot of people will just look at it and have the same reaction as myself. Just saying, what is this? They're reinventing the wheel every 10 minutes. It just seems so unlikely. And I know I've spoken about that before, and I've written about it before. It's worth taking a look at to see what you think, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere. De facto, this would the amendment would make it de facto referendum, but only using the list vote. Now, that part of an amendment I can see getting through. That is a possibility, because the poll that we were looking at earlier indicates that John Swinney's strategy on its own is not going to do anything. It's not going to get anywhere. So the delegates conference, they will know that as well as you and I. This is next month, just about a month away from the less than. They will know that strategy is not going to work. So they will be looking. They'll be looking for a safety belt. They'll be looking for a way out of this, and using the list vote as a de facto referendum, that is liable to find favour. People like that idea. However, they're talking about making it a de facto referendum on independence, and that just won't fly. It won't fly, partly because it's not a referendum, and partly because, well, mainly because it will be disputed. It won't be as conclusive as a vote for independence needs to be. Again, I've spoken about that before. The de facto referendum on independence just isn't going to fly. And there's another amendment, which is conference therefore agrees that Scotland must extricate itself from the United Kingdom as soon as possible and it requires a strong SNP government to do this. That's the SOP to the leadership, the leadership resolution. That's the SOP. That's what says, well, we're not actually voting against you, you know. It's a wee nod in that direction. Conference instructs the party to prioritise obtaining a mandate from the sovereign Scottish people to deliver independence by achieving a majority of the popular vote on the sum of the independent supporting parties' list votes in the 2026 Scottish parliamentary election. Conference recognises that, in practice, a mandate to deliver independence requires certain building blocks to make delivery possible and to get us over the line. These will include a target date for independence, a provisional government to oversee the necessary preparations, and an independence delivery unit to make such preparations. Now, this is where this amendment falls down, because it's talking about setting up these institutions which will have little or no democratic legitimacy. They're just going to be pulled from people who were elected either to Westminster or to Holyrood, and a few others co-opted, as far as I can make out. It's all very vague. And all the way along, it requires agreement among a whole range of organisations and groups. And we know just how difficult it is to get that kind of broad agreement. It simply doesn't exist within the independence movement anymore. So there's very little chance of that happening. If it does happen, it'll take a long time, not weeks or months. I would say a year or two. And even then, it would be horribly fragile. You have all these agreements between all these different parties and organizations and groups, and any one of them could break down at any moment. So it's not really going to fly. It absolutely crucially requires a degree of cooperation that is simply impossible to achieve. We know it's impossible to achieve. People have been talking about it for years, and it hasn't happened. I don't know how many organizations there are now devoted to bringing together the whole independence movement, but the fact that there's more than one tells you all you need to know. There's 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't know, maybe 6 organizations or groups that are all about unity, separate groups that are all about unity, separate groups competing with each other. It's a joke. But then, you know, the whole independence movement's a bit of a joke at the moment. Not that it matters for in this instance, because the idea of a mandate from the sovereign Scottish people to deliver independence by achieving a majority of the popular vote on the sum of the independent supporting parties' list votes in the 2026 Scottish parliamentary election. Well, that just doesn't work. Partly because it's a referendum and it's an election and not a referendum. It's an election pretending to be a referendum. It's pretending to be binary. There's a kind of binary element introduced there with using the list vote, but it's still not going to be conclusive enough. Besides which, it's not a vote for independence. If you think about it, the popular vote on the sum of the independent supporting parties, but all of those independent supporting parties, they're not all of one mind on the constitutional issue. So when you're voting for different parties, you're voting for different things. Let's take the SNP, for example, it being by far the biggest. If you vote for the SNP, you're voting for John Swinney to send a begging letter to Keir Starmer. That is what you're voting for. You're not voting for independence because they're not standing on independence. Neither is Alapa. They're talking only about negotiating independence with Westminster. So I get that would only be a Section 30. That's because that's all anybody could possibly imagine Westminster conceding. They're never going to. They cannot give us a proper constitutional referendum. If we want a proper constitutional referendum, we're going to have to take it. Westminster cannot give us that because the doctrine of parliamentary sovereignty means that Westminster cannot devolve powers which supersede its own. Westminster must always have the last say. That is why the only kind of referendum they would ever, under any circumstances, consider allowing in Scotland would be one which is strictly consultative and definitely non-self-executing. Which, in the words of Nicola Sturgeon and the Lord Advocate, which means it has no legal or constitutional effect. A referendum which has no effect. So that's all it would be. A vote for the SNP definitely isn't a vote for independence, and that breaks the referendum right away, because these are voting for different things. They're not all voting for the same thing. These are arguments. This is me playing devil's advocate here, because these are arguments that will be put by unionists. And what that means is that there will be thrown questions at it. And if it's questionable, it's not conclusive. So it's not going to work. A referendum on independence isn't going to work. It should be establishing a mandate for the Scottish Parliament to assert powers over the Constitution in order to allow a proper constitutional referendum, to allow us to exercise our right of self-determination. That's what it should be. There was a resolution to that effect was submitted, the Newington resolution, but it was struck from the agenda. It is never mentioned in the National. Nobody talks about it because it would have been really powerful. It would have been really powerful. It doesn't look like it's going to be an amendment. I don't see how it could be an amendment unless it was an amendment which strikes everything else and replaces it with this proposal to use the list vote as a referendum, a type of referendum, to use it to acquire a mandate for the Scottish Parliament asserting legislative competence. That's what should happen. It's not going to. Therefore, we're back to, as I said, when we were looking at the polls, we're looking for, at the moment, what that poll is telling us is that it's pretty much no change. There's reforms in there, that's going to have some effect. But it's pretty much no change as far as the constitutional issue is concerned. That's another 5 lost years, another 5 years of nothing happening. Maybe a Section 30 request, maybe, but it'll get knocked back anyway. And if it doesn't get knocked back, if it's granted, then you have my permission to wet yourself, because it all goes wrong from there, believe me. Right, we've got some comments. We've got quite a few comments. Somebody, Stephen Duncan, remind me. Stephen Duncan reminded me that it's Find Out Now, the poll, and then Fraser Darling is saying Everyone I know who is backing Alpa on the list vote are actually current SNP members. Well, that's entirely possible. I'm not sure why that's relevant. It might be relevant for the amendment at conference. I'm not quite sure why it's relevant otherwise. Fraser Darling also says the issue is that with the SNP kicking independence into the long grass, i.e. 2030, they paint themselves as one of the status quo parties. Reform are picking up all protest change votes, change votes. Sorry, I should show that on the screen so you can read it for yourself. Reform, that is true. Reform, they're doing what disruptors do. They are taking the votes from people who are just pissed off with the whole thing. Not a sound basis for electing a government or a parliament, I tell you, but that's what's happening. The SNP need to be offering change, i.e. independence. So independence needs to be in this election's mandate. That is the change that Scotland needs. I totally agree that there needs to be change. But independence isn't in Alpa's, the mandate that Alpa are looking for anyway. And Alpa aren't going to get a mandate on their own. So it's pointless talking about anybody's mandate other than the SNP's, because that's the one that counts, because they're going to be the government on the basis of polling. So it's the SNP that has to be changed. It's not looking as if the conference is going to force that change. The amendments that have been submitted, the amendments to the leadership resolution that have been submitted, probably aren't going to pass, but they wouldn't make any difference anyway. It's not about independence. It won't work. That's all I'm saying, because I've got to move on. Fraser Darling again, Scotland gets the governments that England deserves. Well, yes, we covered that point. Stephen Duncan is our figures man, if you'll recall, the man that crunches our numbers for us. SNP getting 42 seats, that's 74% of the seats in Westminster, on the back of 30% vote share, is more disproportionate as Labour UK as Labour's UK wide in 2024. It's massively disproportionate. It's over twice as many seats than is merited by the votes generated. Yeah, well, that just demonstrates, and I think that's what Stephen was intending. It just demonstrates how broken the British system is. That the SNP can get 74% of the seats on 30% of the vote. It just shows how broken it is. Stephen Duncan again, find out now are a yes-friendly pollster. I'm not sure about that. They have been surveying on this question since 2021, and in all 13 polls to date, they have always had a plurality in favour of yes. Right, okay. But is their methodology okay? Stephen Duncan, again, 9 of these 13 polls have registered 52% in favour. So, as you say, no change. Yeah, the trend is no change. That's the important thing. That's what the polls really tell us. Fraser Darling, the last one, why not simply, if independence parties win a majority of seats, then we unilaterally declare independence, UDI? Well, no, that doesn't work for the same reasons that I said already. That only works if all the parties have the same manifesto commitment, so that all these votes are for that one thing. Right, we're done with the comments now. We've got to rush on because we're now on to the surprise that I said I had for you. Some of you will know Frankie Mary, a lovely lady and a very musical lady. and she has very kindly agreed to do a wee satirical song to close the show. I'm hoping that I'll be able to persuade her to make this a regular feature. It's a lot to ask, a new song every week, but I'm hoping she'll be able to do that. We might open it up to others. But what it reminds me of is some of you may be old enough to remember that was the week that was a satirical TV program back in the day. And at the end of every episode of that was the week that was, Millicent Martin, very famous jazz singer at the time, Millicent Martin would sing a song, kind of summing up all the stuff that had been covered in the show, the stuff that had been satirized in the show. So that's the idea, a wee song, a wee satirical song to end the show. And we'll all be very grateful to Frankie Mary for this. I'll post links to our Facebook page and our website when this podcast goes online. I'm going to let Frankie Mary play you out, and I'm going to say goodbye for now. Bye.
Can we have a referendum, Prime Minister, Prime Minister? Can we have a referendum, Prime Minister? Oh, please. Oh no, you can't have one, can't have one, can't have one. Oh no, you can't have one, can't have one. No, you can't. Oh, why can't we have one Prime Minister, Prime Minister? Oh, why can't we have one Prime Minister? Why not? Because now's not the time, not the time, not the time. No, now's not the time, not the time, not the time. When will it be time, Prime Minister, Prime Minister? When will it be time, Prime Minister? Oh, when? It will be when I say so, when I say so, when I say so. It will be when I say so, when I say so. That's when. Well, in that case, we're a colony, we're a colony, we're a colony. In that case, we're a colony, we're a colony. That's us. Oh no, you're our equals, our equals, our equals. Oh, you are our equals in an equal partnership. Well, equals are free to leave when they want to. Yes, equals are free to leave when they want. So can we have a referendum, referendum, referendum? Can we have a referendum, referendum? Oh, please! No, you can't.